Welcome to CS Radio. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 229 of CS Radio. I'm J. Michael DeAngelis.
And I'm Natty Leach.
And
you're?
Dustin Miller. Thanks for having me, guys.
You're welcome.
Dustin's first time on cam?
Yes, other than the what was it? Was it the 200th episode we did the virtual? Was that on camera?
That was not on camera.
We
were on
it,
camera,
but we didn't post it.
We did a almost completely visual 200th episode and released it as an audio podcast.
Then yes, first time on camera.
Which worked out better. But you've joined us. I think you were on some of our live streams last summer. We did some pre start of the school year live streams.
Yep.
So, and you're a very frequent flyer on our social media channels.
Yes.
Dustin has
Skiing.
created some of the best content this year. He did one at the top of a mountain. He did one at the Penn Relays.
That's right.
He's done a couple in the office. So yeah, you're the master of the content this year.
Yeah, well, it's been fun. I just trying to find different ways to engage with people, have people recognize our faces in the office, other people in the office. The mountain one was on a whim, and as Michael informed me, there would not be overtime involved, even though that was done on a Saturday.
That's correct.
Man, bless you for even thinking of such a thing while you're on a mountain.
Yeah, well, much to the dismay of my wife, who wants to be as far away as possible when filming. So when I informed her that there was going to be one done at Penn Relays,
She's like, see you at the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, she pushed you off the ski lift.
Yeah, no, she left before, and then at Penn Relays, I told her I would move a couple rows away so that she wouldn't be
associated with you.
Exactly.
I didn't see the Penn Relays one.
It hasn't gone
out.
live yet, so it's a spoiler.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, little spoilers.
Actually, it might be.
It's coming out the 8th.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you're always way ahead. That's
yeah.
right.
Whenever I do the monthly schedule and it's Dustin's on there, I always go in parentheses done because he's always way ahead of the game.
Yeah.
In fact, you had time blocked off on your calendar to create your May social content, and you're like, so that's done. So I'll come be on the podcast instead.
That's pretty much exactly what happened. And so again, I'm happy to be here and.
Well, we're thrilled. It's great to we had a guest in the studio, but Natty wasn't here, so it's our first 3-person setup. And that's exciting. We're going to be doing a lot more of it. Yeah. So many thanks again, as always, to Chris off camera who helped us set this up and get everything going and is keeping us all framed up and keeping my wild gesticulations off camera. So I think there's a lot to talk about. It's the end of the semester, and I've just come back from a whole day with our friends at Handshake. I was down in Washington, D.C. yesterday on the George Washington campus.
I was on I was going to say, where was it?
It was on GW's campus. Nice. I had been down to, I think the last time I was in D.C. was for a Handshake meeting at American University.
That sounds familiar.
I got in, and it was a beautiful day yesterday, and I got in about an hour before registration started. So I just took my time and I walked down to GW from Union Station, and it was just lovely. It was great to walk through the city. Hadn't really done that in a long time, so it was fun to see. I had a friend that had lived down there after she graduated from Penn. She got a job at the Woolly Mammoth Theater Company down there, and so I would go visit her for a bit. And so that was we often were. She lived near Chinatown, so I walked through DC's Chinatown. And it was probably a decade since I'd done that, and what was familiar and what was new. And man, and I know Chris off screen will appreciate this because he loves a good pun. Some great pun restaurant names in DC's Chinatown.
Okay.
Walk and Roll.
Okay.
Dumpling District. I mean, if I was going to be making up names, they would be at the top of the list. It was all pretty good.
I don't want to give away my name, but I've wanted to open an Indian restaurant called Nania Business.
I would say, I think you said it before, and I said, well, it should be an Indian-Italian fusion restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's always
like
great
that.
to
Yeah.
be with our peers. It's great to be with the folks from Handshake who are such great conversation facilitators and thought leaders, and they care so deeply about delivering a really good
I said to
product
Michael off mic, I
students.
love that they have a very clear vision of what and who they are and who they continue to be and how they provide their services. I think is really a great person to be partnered with, because you always kind of know where they're going to be coming from, what they value most, and
Yes.
kind of like what their true north is, more or less.
You know, it is always on one. There's a perspective where you say it's always nice to work with someone who caters to your needs and goes, "Oh, you want that? We can do that." But I won't name the vendor, but we went through a process this past school year where a vendor said, "Oh, we could do that for you, no problem." And then it was like almost a year later, and they still hadn't figured it out, and there was no more time to make this happen.
Yeah.
So over promising and under delivering.
I was
is the
going to
thing.
say exactly
So
that.
being very clear and saying, this is what this does, this is the way we're taking it, and you can come along with us, or if that doesn't work for you, there's other fish in the sea.
And we've come from other vendors who the approach is always, when a question is asked, yes, absolutely, but then things go off the rails once that's actually attempted to be implemented, because it gets complicated. If you have a lot of different schools and you're trying to cater to too many audiences at once and all these different niche use cases,
Yeah.
you fix something for one school and it breaks something different for another school.
So that we covered a whole wide range of topics, and I thought it would give us a good jumping off point to have a couple of different discussions today.
Yeah.
So, Dustin, we were just talking about your contributions to our social media channels. Obviously, I do a lot of that. Natty's contributed a lot to that. But one of the things that's been new this past school year, we've been doing it since the fall, is we can share our social media content on Handshake.
The feed.
Handshake has relaunched the front page of the app and the student-facing website to be a feed very much in line with a social media feed. So you get posts and videos along with Handshake content. So you get jobs and employers and events. I think it's a great way to deliver that sort of information to students. Not all of our peers feel the same way. I was having some conversations, and that was like at the top of their "we hate this."
I'm weirdly
list.
always surprised because I kind of forget. I don't know if it's we're easygoing, but a lot of times when we go to different conferences or we go to these things that have other schools, I forget how strong opinions are at other schools about complete things that I don't worry about.
Yeah. And some of it is you can get set in your ways because just have done things a certain way a long time, and other things are. But this, I really did not understand this. So the part of it that I could kind of wrap my brain around, even though I disagreed with it, was that they don't like that it's not just their content, that they're seeing posts that students are doing, both from their school and from other schools, that employers are putting out that they don't have any control over.
And we were in the beta for that when it first came out. I remember that was a question that came up from multiple people, and it is understandable. Like you worry about what if someone says something I completely disagree with in some sort of way.
So, in fact, that was their point. They were like, we tell students, like, please don't rely on TikTok to get your career advice. There's some bad actors out there giving some actual bad advice on TikTok. Now, we've seen people give good advice on TikTok too.
Sure.
This is not a 100.
This is
it's
not
all or
lunatics.
nothing. But they did feel real strongly. Why are we telling them not to do that? But then this is okay. And I was like, well, because you can put your own content there, and Handshake does weight the content you create heavy, so it rises, so it's at the top, and your students are sure to see it. And they're like, well, we don't want to do that. I was like, well, what can you do?
But going back to my point of, like, if you trust someone to have the values that you admire, I think you have at least an added level of content moderation where Handshake is looking out for the right things that you should hopefully also kind of inherently value in some sort of way. Which for Handshake is often, we used to count the number of times they would say democratize.
Yep, absolutely.
Did they do it yesterday?
No, I don't think it
was
said.
They've gotten away
I
from
don't
that.
think it said. I
someone
don't think they
pointed
said it
out.
once.
They caught on to the count.
They did.
What they did say, talk about having a strong vision, and something that I can remember from the very first time we had a demo years and years ago, and one of our colleagues said, "Oh, they think that they can become LinkedIn for students." And at the top of the presentation yesterday, for the first time, really, they said it explicitly. We want this to, I don't want to say replace, but certainly supersede LinkedIn in terms of the student job search, making sure that they're making their Handshake profile a destination for employers and professional connections. Knowing that LinkedIn's not going away, but trying to reinforce to students that the employers who want to hire your age group and people with your experience level are going to be in Handshake looking just for you and not casting this giant net out on LinkedIn, then why not make your LinkedIn profile as complete and detailed as your LinkedIn profile? And I can't disagree with that. I think it's great. And you're now able to, so one of the things that's happened as Handshake has evolved over the years is that those profiles, you can make them public. So you can give someone your Handshake profile link now, and they can see it without having to be in the Handshake closed environment. And pretty soon they're going to give you the option if you want your page to come up in a Google search. So when somebody Googles your name, your Handshake profile can come up right there with your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, Handshake does a good job of having like multiple platforms that I see where they take inspiration from.
Yeah.
They used to have a feature that Dustin was talking about this week about it was kind of reminding me of Glassdoor. But they haven't shown it as much. They used to have. Do you want to talk about it, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, they used to have the tab on the employer page where you could click, I think it was said interview, and then questions that might have been asked during a specific employer interview were out there, just like on Glassdoor, like you mentioned, Natty, for people to look at, kind of help prepare. It was interesting to hear that might have been part of a phase out. Feedback from employer partners, was it?
Yeah. So what I had heard, and don't take this as gospel because I'm not speaking for Handshake here, but this is kind of what I heard, that in talking with their employer partners, some of the features that were on those employer pages, it's sort of the same thing with the schools. The employers were like, we don't love it because it's not coming from us, right?
Yeah.
And so the sort of reviews that people were able to leave and the interview questions that I think were generated from students, I think that the employers felt, because everything else with our name on it in Handshake is from us and official, we don't want these things, even though we can moderate and delete. Why should we have to do that when we can put our own things out? So I know that Handshake has interest in finding places to make that happen. And in fact, something they are just, by the time you hear this, they'll have just finished the beta test. They tried communities, which were essentially little chat groups. And they tested that all through the month of April.
I'm sure the people who didn't like the feed loved that.
You know, I have to say, I bet the majority of the career services staff members in the room, and I will count myself among them, did not realize that was live. I knew.
I didn't know.
I knew it was coming, but I did not know they had actively tested it throughout the month of April, because we're not often in the student app.
Yeah, like I go in maybe once a week to either double check something, or sometimes I'll show a student like this is how it looks. But most of the time I'll log in as that student, and I'm only in there for like
Exactly.
I know where I'm going and what I'm looking for.
So yeah, they tested some themed communities. They were mostly around topics like resume building. There was an AI community. There was there was some industry specific things, I think. But they just were in there facilitating conversation around.
Oh, you know what?
topics.
I did see them post something about that a while ago, but
so it was just they just tried it for the month of April. They got some good feedback from the students who used it, and there'll be some version of it again in the fall.
Was the hesitancy to the feed because of, from your sense, from what you heard, because of it not being their content?
Yes.
Well, I think they're worried that they would launch up their feed and they'd see some guy skiing down a hill and be like, "What's going on?"
And be like, "This guy can't give advice."
So that was exactly that somebody said. You know, specifically, like we've pushed them to go to Handshake, and now there's information coming in Handshake that we haven't seen, that's not coming directly from us, and we don't know what they're looking at, and we don't know that we trust that. Whereas Natty, I think you and I, and Dustin, I think you probably feel the same way, we trust that Handshake has put the thought into this to be delivering quality content.
Yeah, you're not just going to see some, like...
You can't just sign up for a Handshake account and start posting stuff onto the feed.
Yeah, like a random toddler with a phone.
Like TikTok or
something.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, like
you
can
can't
do
those
TikTok
things. Yeah.
Right. So I really encouraged the people in that conversation to think about it.
Look within.
And you know, Natty, like you said, Handshake sometimes takes a strong stance on things, and they really were like, we know it's difficult, but there are certain things that maybe you just need to relinquish some of the control that you've had.
I like when they're bold and they just say like, "This is what we believe in, and this is how it is."
Somebody, I told Natty at lunch during the Q&A during the product update section. Somebody said, "Oh, we really need you to bring back our ability to pin items at the top of the homepage." And like without missing a beat, somebody got up and was like, "No, never." You know why? Because I used to be your product manager, and you would leave things pinned up there for 3 years. You would pin something, and you'd forget about it, and it would be useless. And she was like, yeah, I did do that."
Well, they are usually pretty good about providing reasoning, I would say, as to
Oh,
some of the
that's-
decisions they
yeah.
make. A lot of vendors or other people or just companies in general don't always. Sometimes it's, well, just because. I think Handshake makes a concerted effort to have data to back up decisions that are being made.
Absolutely.
And they do value, I think, the student perspective, the employer perspective, as well as the career services perspective.
Yeah, and I think there have been times where I go, just to your point, Dustin, I go, I don't love that decision for us, but I can't argue. Like, I see your reason.
Yeah, I think even last year at one of our staff meetings, we brought in our Handshake rep, and I think someone in our staff said, "Well, why don't we just not let students do that?" And her response was just, "Well, that's against our philosophy of providing access to as many students as possible."
Yeah,
just very blunt.
It's the same thing. You know, a lot of our Penn has never been like this, even before we had Handshake. But there are certain schools that really don't like how many jobs are in Handshake.
Yeah,
they really want to be offering
the curation,
the curation aspect, and say these are the jobs that we've picked for our students. And Handshake's response is, but what about that one student that does want Christine, who's the head of their education arm and used to be in career services herself. She always gives the example that when she was a career advisor, a student came to her and said, "Do you know what I really want to do? I want to work in a maritime museum." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And if there hadn't been something like Handshake, where all those sorts of opportunities are, because if someone was curating, they might have gone, "Who wants to work in a maritime museum?" and brush that aside.
Yeah.
So let the student decide. And then, it can feel overwhelming. And yes, every once in a while you see something where you're like, "Oh, come on." But they're there for the person who wants it. And the more the students use the system and the more they set their preferences and say, "I want to be in a maritime museum," then those things are going to start to rise to the top. And I don't what could be better than that?
I mean, didn't we have our former director talk about how one of our students really wanted to go do deep sea fishing or something out in Alaska? And that was their dream job after graduation that they would do for a year or two or something. I mean, it's fascinating. I love when students have a clear vision of what they want to do. We should be able to embrace that rather than trying to redirect them to something else.
Especially when it's something that we don't hear every day.
Yeah.
That I think makes it even more fun for them. And to have a place where maybe it's already difficult enough to find those opportunities. To your point, Michael, why limit them in a system that other people can just kind of start to filter out through their own preferences?
Well, I think I remember at one point I was looking and I found a job board that was just for fish hatcheries or something like that. I remember sharing.
Sorry, now I'm just having visions of the three of us giving it all up and becoming fishermen. I'd be dead in a week.
But we could open up the diner though near we could be on Lake Michigan.
Natty would go out and bring the fish in every morning, and Dustin and I would cook it up.
I feel like I'm getting the short end of the
that
stick
was
here.
well. Michael and I
would
already
look
laid
best
out
in a woolly hat.
Okay.
Michael and I kind of already looked at the property, so you might be a little late, but you could still get in on the ground floor.
All right, I'm in.
So I don't know. So one of the whenever you're dealing with any sort of technology project or product, it evolves and things change and things come and go, like we just talked about with that interviews tab. But what are some of your favorite Handshake features, or little Handshake hidden gems maybe that you like showing off to students, or that you use for yourself in your advising work?
I'll start with one that has moved around a bunch, so I think it has been hard to find. But whenever we do on-campus interviews, it's not always easy to find where those are. They're kind of in a bunch of different places. You could find it in the job section. You could find it in the meetings section. I think that's the easiest place to do, but people don't think to look there because you click on your profile menu, and then there's a My Meetings tab, and in there is a whole list of all the things that are going on campus. with the coffee chats, less on the event side with info sessions, but it's all coffee chats,
all the employer stuff.
Employer on-campus interviews. And it shows you the full layout of when those happen. Like, here's the date where the application's open for that. Here's when the employer selects applicants.
Yeah, I do like that.
Here's when the first group of people can sign up for interview slots. Here's where you can be on a wait list if you were chosen to do it later. So it's very clear in a way that I think is helpful to students, but students don't always find it right away. So usually I showcase that to them early in the fall because that's when we tend to have the most employers who are doing those types of things. Although we had a lot of coffee chats in the spring too for banking, especially for that year and a half out style. So early in both fall and spring semesters, I think the best time to check that.
No, that's a good one. This isn't necessarily like a favorite feature. This is more just a need-to-know feature. So for any students listening, having your profile being visible to employers is sometimes, I know that seems very like common sense to do, but I can't tell you the number of times I've worked with students and, I'm not feeling I'm having interaction. So making sure that's turned on is great. On the advising side, for me, something that I really like is always going into the student activity section of an appointment with a student to see if they've worked with our office before, maybe if they've worked with somebody on our team before. I had a colleague last week who, for example, was working with a student and had said that they had helped the student book an appointment with me that I had open for the following week. So I was able to go in, check out what the student had uploaded on their own profile, any notes that staff have the ability to keep track of. I think that just helps me be a better advisor as well. If I have an understanding, if the student's coming from, this is, the 8th time I've used career services, or this is my very first time. And, from our data, we know students on average, I think it's about 1.5 times use our office. So going through the activity section, how many times have they logged in this week kind of gives me a sense of how familiar they might be with the platform and how much Handshake education I might have to provide.
I think Handshake does a good job of leading people towards the career interest section, which helps things kind of float to the top that they are interested in. But sometimes students miss the difference between like the industry interest and the job function interest, something we talk about a lot. Another thing that stands out is just looking by things not by job, but by employer. Sometimes that feels a little defeating because you might look for an employer that you love and they don't have anything posted. But when you do that, you can favorite the employer, and then as soon as they post something, it'll send you a quick email and be like, Disney just posted their internship, or so-and-so is coming to campus for a career fair next month. So it gives you those kind of curated updates based on the exact employers that you're interested in.
There was an employer panel that closed out yesterday's meeting, and the employers on the panel were MasterCard and Geico.
Okay.
And they were both stressing the importance of searching by job role to expand a student's understanding of what they offer, because the person that was there for MasterCard recruits for their consulting arm.
Yep.
She goes, people don't think of MasterCard as a consulting firm. They think of us as a credit card company. But we do a lot of consulting about credit cards.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of people at Penn who go into that for MasterCard. The other one stands out as IBM, I think, also has a consulting
is a huge
side.
Consulting arm, yeah.
Those are two of the companies that are not traditional a management consulting firm, but have those same kind of almost internal strategy roles.
And Geico, which is insurance, she was like, we also think of ourselves as a technology company.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, students who are wanting to go into tech, we're probably not at the top of their list. Interesting. The other company I heard say that, it was several years ago, was in fact Disney.
Yeah.
Who was like, they think of us, rightly so, as entertainment, but we're at the cutting edge of technology in the theme parks. But also ESPN. They're always inventing new cameras and new ways to get slow motion footage and satellites to
GPS
broadcast
on the ball or whatever. They're not actually going to do that though, right? They've talked about
for like the soccer ball, like the world, or for the
no,
but they are. I mean, I don't know if ESPN necessarily is involved with that as opposed to the NFL, but the NFL certainly has engineers and people who are. I think they're experimenting with first down markers and yardage chains, like for the upcoming season.
And like Disney is a frequent recruiter here on campus, but they almost always are pushing their finance roles.
Yeah.
Which is, a lot of our students are interested in finance, so it works out. But I will also often have conversations with students who are more interested in the entertainment side, and they're like, I see they're coming to campus, but they're only talking about finance or tech or whatever.
But I've definitely have known people that have gone into the entertainment side of Disney from Penn. I also know someone who got one of my dream jobs. They became a Disney Imagineer. I realize now that I'm wearing a Disney shirt.
Well, that's why it came to mind right
and
away.
drinking from a Disney cup. So, Disney, if you want to sponsor us, please email us.
You're already sponsoring them.
But I'll take their money.
Additionally.
But something actually, Natty, it flashed me back to our conversation last week on the podcast, where you were talking about your strong feelings about when applications should close.
Beginning of day.
BOD.
BOD.
Again, but then we talked about how sometimes it's a rolling thing. And so the woman from Geico was like, we absolutely go on a rolling basis, and I always tell people the sooner you get in, the better.
Yeah.
She said sometimes we have to her credit, she was like, and this was an important lesson that we learned. They posted an internship really early, like about a year in advance of the position starting. And they got so many applications right at the start that they closed it.
Yeah.
And they were like, and that felt bad because we were sure that there were people that were like,
good.
Oh, this is I have time to work on this and get my resume right, and then they got overwhelmed, so they shut it. So they're like, so we learned that opening that early is probably not good for us.
Good.
She said, but we do always do rolling, so I always tell people who have an interest in us when they talk to us to get in as soon as it opens.
The natural assumption for job application, I think you should just assume it's rolling. Because you never know. It's kind of rare.
No, you don't.
Say
You don't know.
explicitly.
Yeah.
So you kind of just have to assume. And honestly, even if they're not explicitly looking at it as rolling, I would not be surprised if a hiring manager or someone takes a look. Oh, how many applicants do we have so far? And then they see a name, and then that's interesting. This is a Penn applicant who's doing such and such. I mean, those kind of things stick with people, even if it's subconsciously. If they see your name early on in the process, they'll probably remember you later on too.
Yeah.
So I think it's always worth it.
What do you two think about as far as like something being rolling or open? Do you have a time frame in your mind if a job has been open for X number of days that you feel like it's worth doing a little extra research to see if that position is actually still being hired for, or if an interview process is already going on?
I think it's a good practice.
It's hard to know like what that time frame is, because I mean, even here at Penn, if you think of Penn as context, you sometimes see these positions that are open for like months and months at a time.
Yeah.
And I've worked with colleagues who've been like, yeah, we're still trying to find the right person.
Absolutely.
So it is still an active search. But I also, from my own hiring experience, I have had things open in HR, but I have already started looking at the first 40 applicants and set out interviews. And then people might still apply after that. And I'm not really looking because I'm already interviewing, 30 people, 20 people, whatever it is. So I think it is a hard line to know.
It's hard to know. I would say as far as timelines, if something has been up a month, I think that's when you at least start looking.
That's typically my timeline, and that's interesting because students will be like, oh, well, how do I know if this is still open? And so you guys you said it's a good practice, Michael. What do you think are good ways or practices to go about finding information to see if it's worth my time to put together an application?
Reach out to a recruiter. Use our whatever resources that are available.
So if it's through Handshake, if they've got contact there or on their website.
Handshake employer profiles often have a general contact. May not always. Sometimes it is the specific recruiter, but it's usually like interns at soandso.com.
Yep, but it's usually we'll get to someone who can answer that question. If you're having trouble finding someone to reach out to, then our tried and true solution of using CareerShift to find the appropriate person is a good step to take. If you can't find somebody, you can search by job title and find recruiters at Geico or whatever.
I kind of feel at some point, though, I don't know. Sometimes you just drag, like you're spinning your wheels, where would it take...
You might as well just apply.
Just apply and then send an email to someone and say, hey, I saw this was open, really interested. I know it's been open for a while, but would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, and I've already submitted my application, so if you can review it.
Exactly. So, I mean, you're constantly, I think, especially our students who are so busy with all their extracurriculars, our student athletes, like there's so much stuff that they do here on campus that they're constantly juggling their time commitments, that I think that does make it a challenge. But I think you just have to weigh it of like,
Yeah.
how interested am I in this opportunity? How long will it take me just to bang out an application or write a more specific cover letter that might be different from the other things I applied to? And that might be shorter than doing all the research.
All the outreach.
And then waiting for someone to respond and not
That's
knowing
also
if they're going to respond to you.
Yeah. Because how quickly they're going to respond, you don't know.
Yeah, because people always ask like, oh, should I try to have an informational interview before I submit my application? And I almost always tell them,
no,
submit the application first, because who knows how long you're going to be waiting.
Yeah. So I will say, a couple other things came out of this employer discussion. They really didn't. They encouraged doing anything that connects you with that employer, from doing an informational interview to speaking to them at a career fair or going to any on-campus event. Introducing yourself to them, that's really great. They did say that somebody asked about how they view the importance of badging. So if you have a badge on your LinkedIn profile or on your resume, and I thought they gave really interesting answers, and in line, I think, with what we would say, which is, so the person from Geico was like, well, if you've got like 100 badges on your resume and they're just like a badge in leadership and a badge in communication, it's not telling me enough. It just tells me that you went through these modules, right? But if you've got a badge, and this is exactly what we talked about when we talked about it on the podcast a couple weeks ago, if it's some sort of badge or a certificate in something specific like programming language, or what MasterCard said is they love when people complete their forage modules.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
So if
Forage has a lot of different.
If they see you've done that, they that really puts you ahead of the game. I was like, oh,
do we still link to Forage on our website?
We absolutely do.
Yeah.
It integrates with our website. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool like little mini modules in there that don't take a ton of time, but you still get a good perspective on things.
So they like that. So if the employer puts something out, you should take advantage of it. Somebody asked, well, our school does some badging. How would you weigh that? And they were like, it may not mean anything to us. So like anything else, you have to be able to give it context and demonstrate its value on your resume.
I was dancing a little. I wasn't sure if people are going to hear the sounds of 40th Street.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Context is so important for so many different things when it comes to the interview or even the job search. And I think it ties into your point beautifully of you might not think of this as a traditional company to do consulting or to do engineering or entertainment or what have you. But if you can frame it in a certain way with your own experiences, I think that's part of the sell for yourself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I use the example all the time. My favorite thing I saw on Handshake was a writer's room position for the WWE.
Oh, yeah. I also know a Penn student who went to work for the WWE.
Yeah, it's like both, storytelling and writing for sports, but then also like, is it real, Michael?
It's not.
Or is it scripted?
The athleticism is real.
It was real to me.
The stories are constructed. Well, speaking of questioning reality, the final topic the employers talked about was the use of AI, and I thought this was really interesting. So both MasterCard and Geico said they are not using any sort of AI to evaluate applications.
And they're lying.
Including applicant tracking systems?
Well,
yeah, because I was going to say, people have been using like soft AI.
So I'm sure what they meant is current gen generative AI, right? So
large language models.
Yes, I'm sure they're using ATS systems to pull keywords and things like that.
Sure.
But they're not having AI evaluate the applications in any quantitative way.
Okay.
Or qualitative way. MasterCard said that the most important lesson they learned from AI was how to rejigger their applications to make it a richer experience for them and for the applicants. So she said, for example, we used to have for our internship program, you had to write a short essay that was essentially, what does leadership mean to me? And she said, and what we knew for a fact was that AI was going to write those essays.
Absolutely.
And so we were just going to
1000%.
see the same thing over and over again. And so they asked AI how to get around that, and AI said, don't make it a question on the application. Tell the applicants that they should be prepared in the interview to talk about the importance of leadership and what it means to them. And so that has just made the interviews more interesting too. So I thought that was a really smart use of leveraging AI to avoid AI pitfalls.
Yeah.
Unless AI knew that the students would then use AI to prepare
I'm
for
sure
that question in the interview.
They still might, but in an interview when you're on the spot and the whole point is to make it about yourself and to provide more relevant details. Hopefully you're able to do that in the interview. Yeah.
Have you seen this platform? It was from it was a Columbia student. It was I think it was an Ivy League student who started an AI platform, which the whole pitch is cheat on everything. And basically how it works is it's like software on your computer. I don't know if it's like a hotkey or like you do a hand motion so it sees and it starts listening to what's being said, and it will give you like a big response. So one of the exact examples they gave was in an interview, someone asked like, so why is leadership important to you? And as they're asking the question, they do the little hand motion, they hit the hotkey or whatever, and it comes up in the display, and then it spits out, leadership is an important quality because of blah, 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 and it like gives them the answer that then they can just read back to the person in real time.
Because that only works on a Zoom interview.
Yes.
Second of all, no matter how good you are, people know you're reading off a teleprompter.
I think that's true. I mean, when I do mock interviews, it's almost always extremely obvious to me when a student has like notes available that they're reading off of. But to some extent, what parts do you question? Are they just notes that they prepared ahead of time? I mean, maybe you don't question it at all. I don't know. It depends on the quality of the answer.
Depends on the quality of the answer. It depends. I mean, if a thing came up in front of me and I started going, well, the important thing about leadership is that leaders are the most important. Like, you would know if I was reading word for word.
But sometimes it was like they gave some examples of like more technical type questions, so at least gave them the starting point for that technical question of like, what's important in this concept or something, and so then it would show them.
Well,
like,
that feels worse.
Worse in what way?
So leadership, there are multiple ways to answer that.
And you can personalize it
in a technical question. Like if you're interviewing for a technical position and you need to know what the importance of Quartian mathematics are, and they ask you that, and you don't know, and AI answers for you, now you're going into a position without.
Yeah.
That's not good.
But that's the whole point of this platform, is to help with those things.
Well, you're going to get fired.
I only know about it because there's a bunch of like rage articles about is this good, is this bad, all this kind of stuff. I think it's inevitable to some extent. I think the ease of that style of AI being that accessible in that quick of a fashion, is going to happen at some point, right? Whether it's like like you said, only it works in Zoom interviews, but we're not that far away from like a Google Glasses or like some sort of overlay AR style thing being able to show it to you in person if you're just wearing glasses.
That's why if I ever go back into teaching or if I ever get into hiring, it'll just be everything's going to happen in a clean room with a blue book.
Blue book. Oh,
so I accidentally derailed one of my classes in my master's program. I didn't mean to, but I don't remember what the topic was.
You never mean to, and yet here we are.
I know. Here we are right now in this very moment.
Derailing.
The topic in some sort of way came up with academic integrity. And I just pushed back on it. And I made the point of if academic integrity devalues your degree, which is what a lot of people were saying, they're like, oh, cheating is the worst thing you can do in a college setting.
Okay.
And my point was, if that devalues your degree so much, don't you need to rethink how you're testing or how you're presenting information so that if someone can just Google an answer and that's all they need,
yes,
that's
I agree.
the only point
I
of
agree
your
with
degree,
that.
shouldn't you rework how you're presenting your degree? And it went off. There's a whole tangent of people like, no, you should never cheat. It's really wrong. It's all this kind of bad stuff. I was like, but if you have access to that technology available to you, why not use it and then just find a way to either test people in a different environment or get answers or have you synthesize information in a different way that, kind of open book test style instead.
Application is almost always more important than material that can be easily accessible.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think of the most basic example, and it's funny where we are now, but I had a 4th grade math teacher, and the saying was
4 years ago.
Yeah, it might have been 6. And the 4th grade math teacher's comment was, well, we had those sheets where it was timed. You had to do a times table and do your multiplication. And the answer or the pushback was, well, you're not always going to just have a calculator in your pocket.
Exactly.
Well, look ahead
Yeah,
X number of decades, and what do we all have? A calculator in our pocket. So that's one of the first things that came to my mind when you shared that larger example.
I was in like a critical theory media study class or something. I can't remember the title. It sounds completely vague. But we were looking at like Plato or something, and it was either Plato or Aristotle. One of them was writing about how written word would rot your mind because it was this new technology that would make it so you never had to remember things again.
Oh, uh-huh.
I mean, there's always going to be people at the forefront of new technologies that are saying this is terrible because of X, Y, and Z, and you're not going to be able to do this.
These kids and their parchment.
Yeah, that's exactly what the vibe of whatever we had to read was. It was that exact take. And I think about that every time there's something new that comes out that people say, oh, well, this is dangerous because of whatever. I think, people were against paper when it was first invented, and we're okay. Are we?
Goes back to you, Michael, though. People kind of just being a little bit maybe set in their ways on something like that or something new. And it can be scary if it jeopardizes like job security or if it feels like it devalues something or an experience. I think constantly people are evaluating some of that against many things, including the college degree or any degree.
And the really scary part about that platform that I had forgotten about was the commercial is a guy sitting down to have a date, like a blind Tinder date or something like that. And basically he's concocting all of his answers by being able to see like, oh, she likes this type of flower on her Instagram. She took a picture of that. And so all of his answers are contrived by what the AI can find on this person online and spit back out to him.
Just feels disingenuous.
It just comes it's just creepy.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't like that.
I knew you wouldn't.
Well, I guess the final thing that we spent a lot of time on at the Handshake meeting was the first destination survey, your career plan survey.
FDS.
So
an acronym I know.
Yes. Congratulations.
And love.
Farewell.
So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, the FDS, the career plan survey, is something that's given to all graduating students.
We never call it CPS.
No, we never call it CPS. About what they're doing after graduation. So, are you going to graduate school? Did you get a job? Are you seeking one or the other? Are you still looking at grad school, still seeking for a job?
Are you not seeking?
Are you not seeking for some reason? You've got other plans. You're going to take time off. You're going to do a gap year. Are you going to volunteer
in the Olympics?
Military? Yes, so people have joined the Olympics. I remember one year somebody got drafted by the MLB, so they were going to go off and.
We usually count that as a
because
that's more real employment.
So I think it was. I remember having the conversation with the student because he was not going to graduate. He had like a semester's worth of stuff left, so he was on our mailing list. But he wrote back. He said, "Well, I'm actually going to pause and go and play baseball." And we were like, "Oh, well, then we just don't worry about it because when you finish, then we'll count you.
We'll put Philadelphia Phillies.
Then we'll count you." But it's become so it's so important to the work that we do. If you are a user of our services, you have benefited from other people filling this survey out. We put the outcome reports on our website. Emily has done an amazing job making these interactive reports for the undergrad side. We're going to hopefully get an interactive report up for the grad students this summer where you can really deep dive into this information, not just about what Penn students are doing, but when they got the offer, what the salaries are. Like the timeline piece in particular, I think, is information that students really appreciate having. And so it's really important that we get that information from you from the survey. Handshake is about to launch something where they're going to be able to provide us with a certain amount of information automatically based on what's on your Handshake profile or on your LinkedIn profile.
knowledge rate.
They're also connected with a lot of the major ATS systems. So as employers mark people as hired, we'll get that information. But that's all the information we're going to get. That doesn't tell us timeline. That doesn't tell us salary. So there will always be a survey, and we just implore you to please take a moment to fill that out. There's always prizes attached to it. We just did our first raffle.
If you're in Wharton, I'll track you down.
He will.
I have to.
People,
we have to.
And there was
in my
breakout session. We were talking about something, and then somebody went, "Well, poets and quants," and then like about half the room went, "Oh, yeah."
We're very specific. You need to have a certain 65% response rate and no lower
and
than
on
like
a much
70%
and on a much earlier
rate.
deadline than the national.
Yeah,
response.
by like October.
Yeah, where it was, we just handed in our 2024 report nationally today.
I wish.
Yeah. So if you are graduating, please fill out that survey. It's so important. We will come knocking on your door one way or the other, whether that's through email or scraping your LinkedIn, or we put a lot of time in doing our own research.
We used to do phone calls. We don't do them as much anymore.
We don't really do phone calls anymore. We might do some phone calls.
I'm just trying to get them be prepared to
be
tell
prepared
us no matter where.
to block our number.
Yeah. Well,
so that's So please, you'll be hearing a lot from us before graduation. So we really appreciate it if you fill it out. And it's not it's a contest insofar as there's a raffle attached to it, but your answers is not a contest, right? So if you don't know what you're doing yet, or you are still seeking, or you're still waiting to hear about graduate school, please feel free to let us know. And if we can be of assistance,
it helps us be able to help you.
Yeah, exactly that. But it's so important, and all schools have struggled. I mean, when I started back in the dark ages, and it was a paper survey that we mailed out to people. I mean, that was such an operation that we had. But we had an incredibly high return rate. And even when it first went digital in like the mid to late 2000s, 2010 maybe, we still had a really high return rate. And when there was a sudden national interest in student outcomes as a way of justifying the price of going to college, there was a moment where everybody came together to standardize the FDS, and some of our colleagues were really concerned because I think nationally they were encouraging a 70% knowledge rate. And people were like, "Oh my God, like we're at like 30%, maybe." Yeah. And we were like in the 80s at that time. I would give my right arm to be in the 80s. We closed out 2024 with a 57% response rate, which is really amazing, given how low it's been, and a 74% knowledge rate. So we really want to keep that up.
I fight for every Wharton one all summer long.
I know you do.
We get to I think we were at least 71 response rate.
Yeah, it was for high.
Yeah. And then knowledge, I think we're just over 80.
Wow. It's just so important too. I can't tell you the number of times, and again, shout out to Emily for pulling so much of that together. I point to it in advising appointments regularly, especially students that might be concerned about a timeline or feel like they're behind. It is so nice to be able to pull up that sheet, give me what their major is, what they're studying, and being able to look at the timeline and say, look at the X percentage of people that got something from this month to this month, and you're currently 3 months ahead of that.
When you need confirmation that a history major also went into investment banking, or you need the reverse and to be walked away from the cliff of understanding that, oh, you know what, I'm way early. Plenty of people found something in journalism in the spring semester or whatever it might be. It has such good information that I think helps our whole community in a lot of ways. And employers included. Sometimes employers come there to look to benchmark for themselves.
Absolutely.
What are the overall national salary rates for students, so it also helps improve things there.
Yeah. And also what types of roles are they interested in, where they're moving to. Yeah, it's all stuff that employers absolutely have an interest in. So, yeah, help us help you fill out your career plan survey. And keep using Handshake. can make your appointments with us through that. You can see all of us pop up in your feed. Dustin's going to be popping up soon with a brand new piece of content.
Surfing next.
Clips of
That'd be
CS
cool.
Radio show up in your feed. Like, what other reason do you need to be using that?
I can't think of anything else.
Exactly.
2 best ones top of my mind.
So, Dustin, thank you for taking some time out and joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've got another great guest lined up for next week. It'll be our penultimate episode of the season.
Penultimate.
Exactly.
Ultimate pen.
And we'll see you all next time on CS Radio. This podcast is produced by the University of Pennsylvania Career Services Office, a division of University Life. It was created by J. Michael DeAngelis and Amy Lynn Kirshner. Your hosts and producers are J. Michael DeAngelis and Natty Leach, and it's produced, mixed, and edited by Lorna Lynn. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at Penn Career Serve. We'll see you next time on CS Radio.